Quantum physics has forced atheist scientists into a corner. They either have to leave their atheism or hold on to an irrationality that destroys the evidence-based beauty of rational science. And you're going to see how. Quantum physics has changed the way that we look at the universe. When we look at the universe on extremely small scales, at the level of an atom or an electron or a photon, we can see particles coming into existence spontaneously. That means without any cause, without there being anything there before they came into existence to make them exist. We only see this on small scales. Now, when the Big Bang happened, the universe was small, very small. Imagine everything in the universe, this huge universe, squeezed into a tiny, tiny point, the size of an atom, even smaller. This is God's cosmos. Some physicists say that when this happened, when the universe was that small, then the laws of quantum physics would apply. And so, just as when we see small particles coming into existence spontaneously without any cause, the universe too, when it was that small, could have come into existence spontaneously without any cause. They say that quantum physics has proven that the universe can come into existence without any cause. There's two ways to answer this objection. The first way is complicated. It requires some understanding of science, and it just misses the whole point. That's what Bill does in his Kalam cosmological argument. But there's another way. That argument is really simple. You don't need any science, and it actually strengthens the case for God. It shows that this objection is not an objection at all, but it makes the argument for the existence of God even clearer, even stronger. That's what Kalam scholars like Ghazali or Taftazani, that's how they would have responded.
Let's start with Bill's response.
Bill has an argument. His argument is that the universe began to exist. We have evidence for this. And he says that if the universe began to exist, then something must have made it exist because something can't come from nothing. That's his argument. Now let's look at the objection. The objection says that, Bill, when you say that something can't come from nothing, that's not correct. Because quantum physicists observe particles appear spontaneously out of nothing, without anything causing them to exist. Bill gives a couple of responses. Here's two. The first response, he says that empty space, physicists have shown, is actually not empty space. Empty space, what we think of as a vacuum, actually has energy. And that's why particles can spontaneously appear. So particles that spontaneously appear out of this quantum vacuum, as they call it, don't actually appear out of nothing. They appear out of something. And so Bill says to the quantum physicists, your objection is invalid because I'm talking about the universe appearing out of nothing, and the example that you're giving me is something appearing out of something.
But you've shown that his argument that something can't come out of nothing isn't a good one.
That's right, it isn't. That's why you have to understand very carefully what Bill is doing here. Bill is defending his argument against a very specific objection. The objection is that in quantum physics, we observe something coming from nothing. And that undermines Bill's argument that something can't come from nothing. And Bill is responding to this objection. And he's saying that actually in quantum physics, something doesn't come from nothing. It always comes from something, because empty space is something. It has energy. And when he does that, he successfully defends his argument against this objection. But the defense of his argument against this objection doesn't mean that it's a good argument and that aren't any other objections that can be leveled against it. So we've seen already that it can't be defended effectively against the brute fact objection. And we've also seen that it doesn't prove the existence of a necessary being.
So is his second argument the same kind of thing?
Yes, it's also a defense. So what he says is that when we observe the spontaneous appearance of particles at the quantum level, then this spontaneous appearance is related to something that physicists call initial conditions. These initial conditions are taken from our prior knowledge of how that particle behaves in the real world. And when we take that prior knowledge and plug it into the equations, then we can figure out the probability of the particle's appearance at a particular location. So Bill says that what's happening is that these initial conditions, how the particle was before, our knowledge of that, plays some role in the appearance of the particle. It may or may not be a cause. There's actually a debate around that, because a cause is what physicists call deterministic. When the cause is there, the effect is always there. And the thing with quantum physics is that it's indeterministic. The effect doesn't always follow, but it follows with some kind of a probability. There's a debate to be had there. But if we just put that debate aside, what Bill is saying is that with quantum particles that appear spontaneously, there's something before them that plays some kind of a role in their appearance. But with the universe, there was nothing in the universe that could have played a role in its appearance. And so the objection doesn't apply. And so he's successfully defended his argument against this very specific objection.
So there's nothing for the Kalam scholars to defend. Their argument is sound.
Yeah.
The problem is that the quantum physicist who did his experiments didn't interpret his results properly.
Right.
Because the only one who is actually doing anything is God, the necessary being.
Yes. The problem is, interestingly enough, that the quantum physicist didn't bring God into science. And that made him confused. It made him so confused that he rejected causation. And if you reject causation, you can't do science. What is science? Science is the search for the causes of change. What makes the sun shine? What makes the wind blow? Scientists search for causes. That's what science is all about. If you say that quantum physics shows that there's no such thing as causation, there's no science left for you to do.
Everything becomes a brute fact.
Yes, everything becomes a brute fact. But if you understand that everything in the universe is contingent, that it depends on God, the necessary being who keeps everything in existence, if you understand that the laws of nature are actually patterns of divine creation, it gives you a clarity. Quantum physics makes sense. And in fact, quantum events, spontaneous coming into existence of particles, they strengthen the argument because they highlight divine creation. It's like the Big Bang. The thing about the Big Bang is that it highlights divine action. People imagine that there's fire and then there's burning. They imagine the fire made it burn because they don't think things through completely. They're sick, they take a medicine, they imagine the medicine cured them because they don't think things through clearly. They don't reflect on the contingency. But when they see the Big Bang and they don't see anything come before it, they say, wait a minute, that means God did it. God's action becomes even clearer. And in the same way, if at the quantum level, particles actually come into existence spontaneously without any other natural cause to point things to, you look at it and you look at it just in the same way that you would look at the Big Bang. You would say it's contingent because it didn't exist and it began to exist. That means existence is not intrinsic to it. That means something made it exist, and the thing that made it exist had to exist necessarily. And so the quantum event ends up highlighting divine action. It strengthens the argument for the existence of God.
So for Bill, the quantum objection is something that he actually has to defend his argument against. But for Muslims, they don't have to defend anything. In fact, it actually strengthens their argument. It's as if the Big Bang is happening all the time, proving the existence of God.
Yeah, it's like the Kalam cosmological argument happening all over the place.
So what's next?
So I think we're done with the Big Bang. We're done with the Kalam cosmological argument. I think what we need to do now is come full circle and look at the universe with God in the picture and science in the picture and just see what we observe.
Let's do that in the next episode.
If you like this episode, then check out my Why Islam is True course, in which I teach you 4 rational arguments that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself used to show that Islam is true. Learning on YouTube is great, but if you want to reach a learning goal, a learning destination, like how to make rational arguments, how to think critically as a Muslim, how to engage with modern science as a Muslim, then you need to follow a map that's been specifically designed to take you to your learning goal, step by step, through a series of carefully designed learning objectives and learning activities that take you to your final learning destination. That's how this course has been designed. This course shows you the what, the why, and the how. It shows you what we believe as Muslims. It shows you why those beliefs are based on evidence and 100% true based on Quranic rational arguments. And it shows you how to use those arguments to address common objections against Islam by atheists and others on topics such as evolution, the problem of evil, the age of Aisha, and much more. It consists of 20 modules, and it includes bi-weekly live sessions with me, pre-recorded lessons with 81 bite-sized videos, 247 application activities and real-world scenarios, a 24/7 community where you can ask a question and get it answered within 24 hours, and there's an option to buy a course textbook as well. Find out more at www.whyislamis.true/course and learn why Islamic seminaries are adopting this course as part of their curriculum to train the next generations of scholars. This course is actually the first and prerequisite course in the Basira classical curriculum in modern context, a 4-year curriculum consisting of 31 courses that will teach you everything that a Muslim needs to know about their deen and be ready for modern society. This 4-year Basira seminary curriculum is based entirely on the Muslim scholarly tradition, but it teaches you how to apply that tradition to the world in which we live, and it's taught completely in English. Why Islam is True is the first course in that 31-course curriculum. Check it out at www.whyislamistrue.com/course.